Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Financial Advisors Want to Know podcast. I'm Catherine Tindall, and today I have with me Dr. Joshua Wilson. He is an award-winning wealth advisor, former RIA CEO. He's got a PhD in behavioral finance, which is going to be a big part of our conversation today, and he's a growth partner for advisors in FinTechs. He applies neurobehavioral approaches to help firms connect with prospects and grow. In today's conversation, so we had a really great conversation a couple weeks ago, which prompted this podcast talking a lot about just the neuroscience of how people make decisions. But thank you for coming on today.
That's my pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me. I'm excited about it.
I know for a lot of the advisors that I talk to, I think in general, just running a firm, it's all about the decision making. It's really it's all about making the right calls and then the execution. And I think for a lot of the client interactions, that's a huge component, right, of how you're stewarding the clients and shepherding them. It's helping them make the right decisions. So I'd love to dive into the topic of just what goes into making a decision on the cognitive level and things you've noticed in practice with advisors for how they should be thinking about helping their clients, helping themselves, helping employees with that process.
Yeah, well, the first thing that I'd say is we really don't want to make decisions. We like to rely on decisions from the past. Our brains are inherently lazy. Okay.
Yeah.
And a lot of people have had some introduction to behavioral economics or behavioral finance. They're familiar with the book Thinking Fast and Slow by Kahneman and Tversky. And in that book, they use this framework of system 1 and system 2. System 1 being the more reactive and emotional, the system 2 being the more reflective and supposedly rational. Now, that's not a perfect way of thinking about these things, but it provides a good stepping off point. And the point that I'd start with is that our brains are first looking for patterns. They're designed to look for patterns. They're so good at looking for patterns that they'll find patterns where there are no patterns.
Yeah.
So we're looking for patterns of familiarity, things that connect us to decisions we've made in the past. Are there things we can do these, and we call them in behavioral finance heuristics, these ways in which we make decisions and ways in which we come to conclusions that keep us from having to make decisions, to actually think through things. So I like to refer to this as your conscious and your subconscious. Okay. Now, I will often, and referring to these things, I'm challenging people to think about what area of the brain is even being recruited, right? Because, and do you want someone to be in their conscious or their subconscious? And I make the case that you want both, but the timing of which one matters a lot.
Yeah.
Okay. So for example, if I go to your website and everything is very rational, then I'm immediately putting you into decision-making mode, and you don't feel good about making a decision yet. Okay. So when you think about this, it's first we feel in the subconscious, and that feeling is like looking for patterns, right? Is this familiar? Does it seem like it's something that I've trusted in the past? Is the face familiar? Is the voice familiar? Is there something familiar about this person? Is this decision familiar? Is it something that I can take a shortcut on? And so when you're making a decision, it's actually something you're feeling. So I like to say that the brain decides before the mind knows. And what I mean by that is your brain has made a decision. It has gone a route that it wants to go. And this is the energy saving route. And then it's trying to avoid having to go into this prefrontal cortex, the mind. That's where the decisions are made. So when we think about this, when we're thinking about this in a marketing context, for example, it's it's the fact that people already have preconceived notions and preconceived connections. This kind of gets also into, I know that one of the things we discussed at the week was the modern client journey. Is, used to when I was first starting in the industry, the people that you were prospecting to, they didn't grow up with the internet.
Yeah.
So they were not internet natives. I got the internet when I was 15, so I grew up with it. So your typical client 20 years ago versus your typical client now, they don't go to you to get the information. See, 20 years ago, they didn't grow up with the internet. So we had the early days of online trading. We can go to TD Ameritrade and things like that, but that was still your early adopters and mostly younger people. Nowadays, your average person grew up with the internet or got it at a relatively young age, so they don't feel the need to go to you in order to get information.
Mm-hmm.
So there's this kind of old school, what I call old school sales, which is when I hear advisors say something like this to me, I know they're in that old school client journey mindset where they'll say things like, if I can just get them in front of me, then I know I can build rapport and then we'll be fine.
Yeah.
Like, well, that's old school. That's for people that expected to go to the expert to get the information.
Yeah.
Nowadays, that rapport building and that credibility building and that familiarity building and that desire starts a lot earlier.
Yes.
So people are expecting to get to know you, to feel familiar with you, to build some sort of connection with you before they even speak with you.
Yep.
So when you get them into a meeting nowadays, even if you can get them into a meeting before they've had that persuasion, if you will,
mm-hmm.
you're still getting them there and they still have this gap from what they're used to getting before. This gap in, I've had all this pre-work, this persuasion, this pre-familiarity, this working into my existing patterns.
Mm-hmm.
So when we think about making a decision, it's, okay, I want to feel about it and then I want to confirm it. And so my rational brain is what I use to confirm it. Instead, a lot of times what we're trying to do is explain the benefits to people.
Yeah.
And then and expect them to then get it and then feel good. That's the wrong order.
Yes.
Feeling comes first.
Yep.
Okay. Because and when you think about this, is like, what part of the brain does speech even come from? Doesn't come from the subconscious. It doesn't come from the feeling. So when I have a feeling about you and these feelings, these connections, this plasticity of if you've heard of neuroplasticity, it's the way that the brain creates pathways. Mm-hmm. So you've already going down familiar pathways when I'm thinking about you and your offering. Once you've been on that pathway a few times, you start to become familiar. You start fitting into patterns. My brain starts looking for other connections to other mm-hmm. things it's familiar with. So the decision-making process is already happening. So by the time I actually get in front of you and talk about your business, it's much more about confirming and rationalizing.
Yeah.
Because your words, again, if I just start you early on and I say, why did you do X? Your brain is going to have to take a feeling and it's going to have to filter it through the cortex where the speech is and provide an explanation that makes sense to the prefrontal cortex. Mm-hmm. So it's a part of the brain that it doesn't need to make logical sense to, being filtered through a part of the brain that needs to put together a sentence. So now it needs to make sense. So we're making decisions and then we're rationalizing these decisions. When you're starting from the front here and saying, I want to help you make a decision, you're going the wrong direction because we start with the feeling and the familiarity and the connection, and then we filter that through the rationalization, and that's how we make decisions.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. And so when advisors are thinking through this because I'd like to hit this in two fronts, the marketing side of things, mm-hmm. right? When you're talking about the persuasion and, I've heard something like people make 80% of their buying journey before they even talk to you. Like they've already figured out generally what they're looking for, checked you out, seen videos of you, they do their homework and they want to make sure it's the right fit before having that exposure of the conversation and, are they going to try to persuade me or I don't know who this person is. So I'd love to hear more of your practical advice around how to apply this on the marketing side of things. And then I'd love if we can then go into, okay, for people who are already existing clients and we're trying to help them actually do the service delivery and, you come up with a plan for them and this is what you need them to do. How do you help get buy-in when somebody's a client in that decision process? But I'd love to start on the marketing side because I feel like when I talk to advisors, that's probably more of the concern that I usually hear. Just a slight interruption in this conversation. I wanted to bring to your attention two things that are important for you to know. So, we're always at the mercy of social media algorithms. So, if you can subscribe to the show, that would mean a lot to me. Even more to me if you can leave a rating and let me know what you think about it. But we have a new newsletter that's coming out. It's going to be very active in 2025 that is specifically around tax issues that I'm seeing advisors face in their own practices, changes in legislations, and the pieces that I think are critically important for you to stay ahead of as an advisor with the new administration. So nearby, wherever you're interacting with this, will be the link of how to sign up for our newsletter. Also nearby will be the link to my LinkedIn, which is the best way to get in touch with me, learn more about what we're doing for advisors in the tax strategy and compliance work that we do, and also to get access to the various tools and interviews and things that I do, specifically designed to help you improve your practice, improve your own tax situation, etc. So let's get back to the episode, and thanks for tuning in.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So the first thing I'll say is there's no universal one way to do things. Okay.
Yeah.
So there's always going to be some flex here. And that's because that people have different psychological profiles, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the thing that's going to be the most appealing to me is not necessarily going to be the most appealing to you. So part of this really is, okay, we can get 80% of it. And then the 20%, the devil really is in the details and getting in and an advisor really getting into who are you trying to speak to? What is your doorway into this conversation? Because, for example, just because you're saying I work with airline pilots or, XYZ, this is my niche or who I work with, that might be your doorway, but then you still also have spouses and things like that, right?
Yeah.
And so these things, there will always be nuance with this, but the biggest thing is that most people start with the right perspective. And the perspective that advisors start with is a perspective that is from talking to other advisors. Mm-hmm. And so we tend to get in our world and we talk to each other and we build each other up and we say, well, what do you say to clients? What do you say to clients? What do you say to clients? And so then we get in our little category of advisors. Mm-hmm. Well, I'm a fee only advisor. I'm a fiduciary advisor. So then we all say the same things. And 20 years ago, being a fiduciary or fee only or something like that, that was a bit of a niche. Now if they're talking to three advisors, a lot of them are saying the exact same thing, especially if they're actually doing their research on things, on stuff.
Yeah.
So and starting off from this, it's number one is people are busy. They're not thinking about you. You're trying to interrupt the pattern. And so often we're trying to put in front of them everything. And we're saying things that very much blend in together. I just did a post on LinkedIn where I asked AI to write a advisor's website. And if your viewers listen, they can go check that out. And it basically, if you go read that, it sounds 90% like every other advisor that you've heard. They use all the same terms and all the same stuff. And so saying all these things because you're trying to show what category you're in, but all it's doing is just blurring the waters. They care about getting what's different as quickly as possible. Yeah. So a lot of this fluff is you're trying to just get attention. The first thing you've got to do is think in terms of getting attention. That's interrupting their pattern. Mm-hmm. So although I tell people you got to create connection, most people don't start with connection. Most people start with, I have a pain, a problem right now. What's the quickest way I can get some relief off of this pain and then earn the next level of interest? So when you're doing this, you've got to think in terms of get out of this mindset as I just got to get them into an appointment. Because advisors are stuck. A lot of advisors are stuck in this mindset, the old school mindset, where I go from zero to appointment. And then I have this process of meetings. And then they find that a lot of them never make it to the second or third meeting.
Yep.
So that first thing you've got to be doing is think, okay, I've got to earn the attention, and then I've got to get them into a pipeline that's going to help them to, number one, believe that I can solve their problem, have some unique way of solving their problem, some unique process, some unique training, some unique experience in solving a problem that's specific to them. Because we're out of the age of generalists. People are looking for something special, or they're looking for a relationship. If you have a relationship, you can be a generalist if you're leading with relationship.
But if you're not leading with relationship, and when I say leading with a relationship, I don't mean putting on your website, we are so relationship oriented. No, I mean, you've already got an existing relationship. You've got a way to create a relationship before business comes up.
Yeah. Yeah.
So in this process, now you've got to start dripping on them your humanity and your familiarity, because you're wanting to get them in a situation where they're seeing how you're similar, how you're connected, how they feel connected to you, how they want to work with you.
Yeah.
I kind of halfway discovered this by accident years ago when I was a rainmaker for a firm. And I started noticing that people that were closing business with me would either before the beginning of the meeting or sometimes at the end after they'd already signed up, they would tell me they Googled me.
Mm-hmm.
And this was way before I had videos and things like that online. But I figured out if they told me that they Googled me and they found this graduation speech that I gave in college and they read that graduation speech, they were going to close.
Yeah.
And I started thinking, wait, why is this? As I go dig into the speech, I start asking people questions, and they were finding these little things that they connected with. I was like you. I have this in common with you. I have this in common with you. I have this in common with you. And I would even find that people that I had no idea wouldn't have thought on the surface that they would be the person that connected. Because to me, my story is pretty unique. But no, it's a human story. It's a human story of human experience, and it gets emotions. Even though the story, the details may be different, the emotions that were felt, they connected to that emotion.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got to find ways to start dripping in your humanity and giving people what I call relationship handles, something they can hold on to say, okay, I'm like Joshua. I feel Joshua. I want to work with Joshua or Catherine. And then you start having to kind of go back and forth between credibility, other social proof, things like that, but also continue to go back and forth to that humanity and that connection. Because the goal is, by the time they're speaking to you, they should be familiar with you. They should feel some kinship to you, some connection with you to where they desire to work with you. And they're coming to you only for the rationalization of the decision, not for the decision itself. Because you're getting a lot of people that are at that end of that conversation and they're thinking and they're saying to you, I need to go think about it.
Mm-hmm.
They're unintentionally lying to you.
Yeah.
Because the problem is they've not thought about it. It's not that they've not thought about it. The problem is they don't feel comfortable with it.
Yeah.
And you don't go from rationally. If you've ever been in an argument or with someone who is very emotional, you know that all the rationalization in the world's not addressing those feelings. Yeah, but honey, I didn't do this, and I didn't mean this, and you know this, and here's exactly what happened, and look at this data. That doesn't change hearts. So
no.
They say they're going to go think about it. They may think that they're going to think about it, but they're really going to go feel about it.
Yeah, that is very true. That is very true. And I just love the way that you're emphasizing this, because like in my mind, something that I always think about is, when you're running a practice, it's almost like you're running Disneyland where all the trash needs to get taken out at the right times. Like all the technical work needs to be executed at the right time. All the supply chain management needs to be executed at the right time. But like, what is the customer actually seeing when they go to Disneyland? Like they don't notice that, the lights all turn on at the same time and that the landscaping is, has been changed over correctly. Like they don't notice that stuff. They notice the feeling. Yes. Part of it. And I think for us as technical advisors, it can be really misleading to think, oh, well, people are buying that the trash is not there and that the food's here on time and that the lights turn on and it's like, no, they're really not. Like they're buying the feelings. Like that's what it is. And until and the rest of this stuff, like the technical execution, it's just table stakes. And being able to have those feeling moments and realizing that that's what people are actually looking for. That's how people are actually processing things is so true. Because something I've really noticed too, I'm also really interested in like personality typing and cognitive functioning and things like that. And the actual percentage of the population that is primarily analytical is vanishingly small. Yeah. Most people are not like that. And it tends to be often for advisors and people who are technical professionals. Like I noticed this in my own profession, we tend to be the analytical ones and we like to think that other people are like us, and they're not. If they were, they wouldn't, they would be doing things themselves. Like they would be, they would be you, but they're not. So just having that mindset of realizing, oh, it's not the analytical piece. Like it's the table stakes that work is there and it's done correctly, but it's largely unseen by the client. And it's really more the transformation that analytical work achieves, and then making sure that those feeling pieces are really happening. So to switch out from, the marketing perspective, client intake, to for advisors who are trying to improve the dynamics within the client relationships that they already have. And, something that I've heard a couple of times is, you give a client a piece of advice, or, we have to do this, we have to do that, and they can self-sabotage, or they procrastinate, or those pieces where that the core issue is that something in their subconscious is not locked on, or something mentally is not clicking, even if they're saying yes, that there's something that's not connecting. What's some advice or, insight that you have into those situations for how advisors should be thinking through those client interactions to really get people to actually do what we're telling them to do?
This is going to be a topic for many, many years. I'm not sure if we'll ever really pinpoint this, but the biggest thing where to start? I think
it's a huge question. I'm sorry.
It's a big question. We'll take a piece of it. I think one place to start is over. And what I mean by that is I've got to say, okay, this is a puzzle that I don't have all the pieces to. So let me start over and let me ask some more questions about the data that I already have. Because just because someone agrees that something should be done, or that it is a good idea, or that would be good in the future, there's something that's standing in the way right now. And sometimes that is a feeling that could be from the past, that could be from a previous relationship, a current relationship, or even how they were brought up. And I know that this gets into the touchy-feely stuff that a lot of advisors don't want to get into. And so I'm like, hey, if this is not interesting to you, I'm sorry, but there's nothing. I'm not going to rationally be able to talk you out of this, man.
Yeah, it's part of the job.
Part of the job, man. And you either accept it, that this is emotional, or you bang your head against the wall. That's all I got for you. Okay.
Yep.
But if you can accept that, hey, this is not a logical thing, because if it was logical, they would have already done it. Okay. You got to see, is there an emotional block there? For example, this comes up with a lot of time with people with money that they don't invest. I see this happen a lot. And it's usually that they've got some number in their head that makes them feel comfortable. That, once my dad told me that if I had $100,000, or, that when we got to $50,000 in the bank, I knew X, or when I got this, it's a feeling that makes them feel comfortable. And so if you can't get to the point where they're telling you why something is important to them, then you're not going to get to the point of overcoming that with something that's rational. Yeah. You've got to get to the point where you understand why there's a connection with that number, or with this thing. And then is there a way around it? Because you can't move it. You're not just going to tell them, hey, this is a route. Yeah, I know it's not right. I know I should do that. I know I should invest this money because I can get a return. But it's just that the benefit, the cognitive benefit, the emotional benefit still might be bigger than what they can get. And if that's something that you find out that the emotional benefit is that big to them, it may be something where you have to say, hey, it sounds to me like the emotional benefit of leaving $100,000 in cash when you really don't need it is big enough that you are going to surrender this. But if you do that, here's the cost, here's the trade-off. Yeah. Yep. And is there a way that we can reframe this in this situation? If you can get them to the point where they're saying, yeah, okay, maybe I shouldn't do that. Can you reframe it to the point of, okay, can we get safety, the feeling of safety, from something else? Yeah. Because this definition of safety is no longer serving you. Yep. And as someone who grew up very modestly with money, I've had to look at some of my attitudes towards money and say,
I see why this served me when I was 18 and when I was 25, and especially when I was 15, things, but it doesn't serve me anymore. And so I've got to consciously change how I'm attaching facts to emotions. But the how long someone's been stuck in this is going to have a real impact on this. So
yeah, absolutely. So for advisors who are interested in learning more about the work that you do and going deeper into your world, what's the best way for them to find you?
Yeah, so I'm pretty available on LinkedIn. That's the best place to find me right now. Just search for Dr. Joshua Wilson, or maybe you'll put that in the show notes. I'm also on YouTube, and I'm starting to get a little more into to social media. So I have quite a bit planned for social media for 2025. But best place to get me is LinkedIn. I post there pretty frequently some ideas and best practices around sales and marketing, but especially with an emphasis on neurobehavioral finance, that way that our brains and behaviors impact, and kind of thinking ahead of things and trying to help advisors to plan and tactically improve.
Yeah, I love that. So for listeners, I'll post nearby wherever you're interacting with this, how to get in touch with Dr. Joshua. Thank you so much for coming on the show today. Great conversation.
This has been a pleasure. Thank you.